We're not retreating, Stephen. We're advancing in another direction. Oh my god, he's filled his chaff with funny tasting jelly sweets. I will not be impaired so easily. Stephen, space snacks! Ow, god damn it, dude. Oh, check me out though. I'm gaming so hard right now. No one will ever game this hard or be this immersed. Like I'm practically in a game, Stephen. I think I can smell my character's space bio. Red. Something came in the post for you. Is it? My inflatable Chris Roberts pillow? No, I don't think so. It says Tobii on it. Oh my god, Stephen. Do you know what this means? That we're shilling for the Amandem? What? No, Stephen, don't be silly. It means that I'm going to have to lead my people across the Red Resort Sea and out of the slavery of turning their heads with a mouse. That and you're going to have to dust around here, Stephen. The people must be awakened from their ignorance. Go find the French tickler. We have got work to do. This cockpit just became more powerful than anyone could have imagined. Roll that new snazzy intro, Stephen. Sheesh! We got a snazzy new intro, son. Psh. This was made for me by my good friend, Lens Nation. You've probably heard of him. He's been on the show a lot for Machinima and stuff. I was on his top hanger show being a star in a reasonably priced Aurora MR, and he was just like, dude, you know what you need? A YouTube logo. And I was like, okay. And then he just slapped me with this bad boy. You are a legend, and I can't thank you enough, dude. It's absolutely beautiful. I'll leave a link below where you can find all his artworks and YouTube and stuff. You will not be disappointed if you click it. Trust me. Thank you, Lens, from the bottom of my heart, dude. You absolutely nailed this thing. Anyway, good day, fellow space citizens. Welcome to Red Resort. As you can probably tell, this video is about how you can potentially increase your immersion in Star Citizen. Why should you listen to me about such first world problems? Well, you probably shouldn't. To be honest, I am the type of person who'd shake an alien egg like a freaking magic 8-ball and start asking it stupid questions. But I do only go for walks outside because the ray tracing is much better. It's safe to say my ultimate goal is utter immersion. This has been my primary purpose for many, many years. And I've been through all the stages of that process. I've played mouse and keyboard, I've played stick and throttle, I've played stick and stick, and now I'm playing stick and pedals. And you can play however you like, obviously, and you'll have just as much fun as me. And that really needs to be said. I'm not trying to say if you're on a particular control type that you should shift to something else. That's not what this video is about. These are mere trinkets at the end of the day, and none can really beat the other in terms of performance, apart from in some small areas which we'll get into. Some of the best racers and PvPers still use mouse for its diabolical precision, for example. I'm coming from an angle more of immersion and comfort and feeling. And it's weird because at each stage of the cockpit upgrade process I felt comfortable and was happy. But after each edition I was like, nah, this is better. And when I finally added the pedals I realised, yes, we have definitely peaked right now. This is just crazy and it feels amazing. And all I'm trying to do is describe that thought process and why it might appeal to you. There are varying degrees of benefit for what each device will add to your experience. For example, if I was to add a bank of switches, it wouldn't make as much of a difference. It would be cool and provide some usability, but because it's not a primary input, it wouldn't really enhance my connection to the game as much as, say, a flight stick. And that may change as more careers become prominent in the game. Say your primary role in the game is as an engineer aboard a capital ship. Maybe a button bank would indeed become your primary input for shifting shields around and the like. What I want to do here is basically outline what I've added over time and how each addition felt or added to the overall experience. It's basically me documenting what I thought about each upgrade as I went and whether I thought it was worth the expense each time. The short answer though is yes. Yes it was, and I'll go into all the details of why as we go. So, the very first thing I did way back when I was on mouse and keyboard was buy a head tracker. And to be honest, it's the one thing that's tied all that immersion together across all those stages of building that cockpit setup. And it's arguably the biggest change you can make to enhance your immersion in the game. And it can be done for a relatively low cost as well. Something about removing head movement from a hand control and applying it to your head is the strangest, most liberating change you can make to your setup. For years I've ran with a cheap Track IR device tied to a PS3 eye camera, and it was sufficient for my needs, but recently Tobii made the very questionable decision of sending me a free eye tracker and sponsoring this video. So, obviously I sold it on eBay and took their money and ran. No you didn't, Red, you were practically kissing their feet. Stephen, okay, Stephen is right, I said yes, and I've been using it for a while now in all of my sim gaming activities. And yeah, I'm pretty impressed. I used it in Arma 3, Elite Dangerous, DCS and Star Citizen, and I'm totally happy with the device. The device I had some shortcomings which were alleviated by the eye tracker, but it does have a few of its own, and each seems to have some upsides over the other. But after weighing things up, I'm definitely ready to have it replace my previous Track IR setup in the cockpit. For the longest time I've always had my eye on it, weighing up whether it would be a good investment. What we're going to do is go over the device and what it can bring to the table for Star Citizen. What are the benefits of using it over Track IR, and what are some of the things I feel can be improved. Then we'll go over stick and HOTAS, stick and stick, and stick and stick and pedals. That's a lot of sticks. Easy, Stephen. After that we'll take a look at some extra functionality that can be found in the form of things like Matric, Game Glass and Voice Attack. So, let's go on with the show. Sorry, I won't do it again, I promise. But look at it. Just look at it. Okay, so as I mentioned, I think that head tracking as a concept is one of the best things you can invest in for extra immersion. Let me just expand on that for a bit. Ever since I tried a head tracker back in the Elite Dangerous days, I've not been able to go back to playing without head tracking enabled. That should tell you something right away. It might seem weird if you've never used head tracking, but it makes me feel weird and restricted when I don't have it on now. Essentially, it gives you a whole range of extra controls that you don't even need to think about to use. It just happens naturally. Basically, you can't be changing your character's direction of movement with a mouse and also be controlling which way you are looking with the same mouse at the same time. Does that make sense? I think it does. Head tracking takes the camera pitch, yaw and roll movement and removes the need for the mouse to have to deal with that in any way, shape or form. And you might think, oh no way, that's just one more control input I'll have to learn. No, he said flatly and a little bit annoyed. You already know how to turn your head. As soon as you get it working, it becomes as natural as turning your head in real life. Enter Tobii Eye Tracker. Tobii uses a bunch of sensors to not only track your head movement but also your eye direction. On screen now is a built-in representation you can display with the Tobii software that shows you exactly where your eyes are pointing, and it's very accurate. You should have no problem if you wear glasses, but it's recommended you set up a profile for use both with glasses and without. Some types of lenses with reflective coatings may affect the eye tracking's ability to gain a reflection from your eyes. So definitely have a dig around Reddit to see what people's experiences are. Far as I can see, the problems seem few and far between, and it looks to work like a charm even with glasses on. Plus, for Star Citizen I've found I'm only using the face tracking function anyway. The Tobii 5 comes with an adjustable mounting clip that goes at the bottom of your monitor. This can bend itself to attach to a curved monitor also. It works perfectly in low light scenarios, and as far as I'm aware, only really bright lights such as direct sunlight will cause any problems to the tracking. There are a few other interesting features included in the software as well. Camera Boost, for example, allows you to artificially increase and adjust the range the camera will move versus the amount of head movement. Cause let's face it, nobody wants to be trying to look all the way behind them whilst side-eyeing their screen getting a sore neck. In Star Citizen in particular, the Tobii is very well catered for. And I'm going to be honest here, until I got these settings dialed in, there was a period of time where I thought me and Tobii were probably going to have to go our separate ways. Basically, I increased the pitch, roll and yaw sensitivity a fair bit and completely moved the center stability slider all the way down. I also disabled the 3D movement parameters. These would let your head move in a 3D space, so straight forward and back, left, right, up and down. These would normally be good for certain things, especially in DCS where you have to sometimes move your head left and right to peer around levers and stuff to get to certain switches. But for Star Citizen, it was only really good for getting to that 1 MFD on the floor in the Corsair, which is now disabled anyway. It was also pretty good for looking behind your chair to see if there's a voidie there, offering you some free railgun ammo. But I preferred my head to be in a fixed centre point. And as soon as I did all that, everything just clicked. Because let's face it, there would be no point in using it if it's not better than what I already had. So why did I end up preferring it over my previous device? Well, to be honest, in Star Citizen, where the preferred input method is face tracking, it's not better in the sense that it can track better. In fact, it tracks with about the same efficiency and accuracy overall. But it takes away a few problems that were always really annoying about the Track IR on a headset. First is, it's automatically always centered. With Track IR, you're constantly pressing a button to reset to center. With this, although it can get itself a bit offset on occasion, usually within a few seconds it rights itself. But I found that this happens very rarely, maybe once or twice in an entire session, whereas with Track IR I was doing it practically every couple of minutes. And you still can set a button to reset the Tobii if you feel it's necessary. The second is you don't have to have a headset on. So if you're playing through speakers, you don't need to sit with headphones on, just so your head tracking has somewhere to be. Plus there's no additional cables running to your head. And third, there was always issues with Track IR when turning at certain angles. The software uses 3 point lights to approximate your current head position. If those lights ever cross, the software thinks you've suddenly snapped your own neck. To avoid this, normally the best practice was to lower the maximum output so that you turn a lot less in certain directions to reach the maximum saturation for that axis. For example, if I turn right and down, my head can occlude some of the lights. If I turn up and left, the lights could cross over, which could sometimes lead to some asymmetric tuning when getting things to work just right. I never really had a problem with it until I felt the difference with the Tobii. Once I got it running just how I wanted, I realised that the biggest thing I liked about it was just how much more natural the motions I was making were. It not only lets me turn more freely without issue, but because it lets me just turn that little bit more, there was more range. I had to find that one point I was trying to look at on the screen. Also on Track IR, when running around on foot, I felt that if I turned my head whilst turning a corner, I was never sure where my body was facing when we tried to straighten back up, and I'd end up running off at weird angles. Now that doesn't happen, and I feel a lot more confident and connected to the rest of me. Small things, but they all add up to make a big difference. I'll leave my specific tunings in a pinned comment below. Head tracking does a bunch of cool things in Star Citizen which you may or may not be aware of. For example, you can set your salvage heads to manual gimbal. This freezes your ship pitch and yaw and lets you just point the salvage heads with your face. Pretty cool stuff. Or you can also manual gimbal your weapons and use your face to shoot ground targets. Like, someone really needs to start giving these guys some railguns, because they've got no chance really. Personally, I enable head tracking for everything in game other than looking down sights and looking at the mobi-glass. For FPS, it's absolutely awesome. Again, it's just a more natural feeling. Peering around corners whilst you walk, whilst keeping your gun trained on the most likely point of contact, or targeting enemies by just looking at them and locking instead of moving your whole freaking ship. And there's a lot more subtle things that can just add to the whole experience, like just tracking things as you move around them. I feel like more situational awareness is possible overall, which can be a pretty big advantage in a game with 6 degrees of freedom, where enemies can come from pretty much everywhere. And then in third person camera, it gives you another 3 axes to work with instead of just the default rotate camera around the player or ship. Anyway, I hope I've made my case there, and I hope I've gave you enough to chew on so that you don't think I'm only saying it for Tobii's sake. To Tobii, I would make some suggestions and point out a few issues that, by the way, my old head tracking system doesn't suffer from. For one, as you can see, my particular situation doesn't work well for the mounting in particular. This is supposed to be mounted on the bottom of the main screen, and I couldn't do that because it's a TV and it's like a sheet of paper. I think they do offer a small tripod that lets the tracker sit on your desk though if you have a similar setup to mine. Just bear in mind the device has to be near the bottom of your screen. The website states that for the eye tracking components to work perfectly, monitor sizes would most likely be better staying 27 inches or under for 16:9 or 30 inches for 21:9. I was finding I was struggling to get the eye tracking in particular into these corners with this setup. But again, I've mounted it incorrectly and it's at head height and it shouldn't be, and the TV is much bigger than what they say on their website they support. So that's probably on me, to be fair. When I was testing the eye tracking functions included in Star Citizen, which include gaze-based targeting, I found I could lock targets up in those corners. I'm not sure how that's working. It's maybe dependent on me facing that way a little bit as well, but it seemed reasonably accurate in testing. Not that it matters much because I'm really happy with how smooth the experience is with the face tracking, so it doesn't make much difference to me personally. But you can mix the input to have a little of both head and eye tracking, and you can do that for individual activities like when seated or in FPS on foot. Like I said, there's been a lot of effort to implement this into the game, with a lot of options available. The other thing I've noticed is that you can't eat. You just can't eat stuff. Like I'd normally be chewing on gum, like a lot of gum. But this is me chewing, look. My head isn't moving, but something about moving my jaw makes the device think that it is. This is me opening and closing my mouth. It's pretty weird. It's definitely not a deal breaker obviously, and you can mitigate it by putting that center stabilization setting back up above the default. But I love everything on full blast because I'm just a bit like that. So no more gum for me. This could be an effect of the device being level with my face instead of looking up at me from a 45-degree angle, which is where it's supposed to be. I'm not sure, but apart from that, that's all the bad stuff I've got to say really. As the months go by, if I find anything, I'll leave it in a pinned comment below. Maybe some long-term users will also leave tips, which I'll pin as well. But yeah, it's apparently 20% off now from the 18th of November to the 2nd of December. So get yours now using the code below. There's a sweepstake on to win one as well, so knock yourself out with that. The channel will hopefully get a little kickback too, which will go straight to better giveaways and stuff, probably. It might also go on hookers and spaceships though, so you have been warned. There's no way Tobii are paying us for this, is there, Stephen? Not a Care Bear's chance in Pyro, dude. Right. So now we've got you blasting and scraping with your face. Let's figure out what you're going to do with your hands. First up, we've got stick and throttle. I still call it a joystick because I'm so secure I don't need to hide that I'm still a child playing pew pew with my spaceships behind words like flight stick. This makes me superior in every way. And you still watch cartoons and play Fortnite? Shut up, Stephen, I do not play Fortnite. That is a lie. You play Minecraft though. Minecraft is different, Stephen. It is the void which binds. Anyway, stop interrupting with your useless prattle. My people need advice about thrust, mastering, and stuff. So, stick and throttle. Should you get one? It depends. There's some stipulations that I'd like to go over first, especially if you're getting one for Star Citizen. But first, let me take you back to what it was like to get a HOTAS in the first place. Going from mouse and keyboard or gamepad to HOTAS was weird. First off, there was suddenly a lot more setting up to do with binds and whatnot. Also, there's a bit of a space requirement. I got this bad boy for about $30 back then and sat in front of the living room TV on an office chair with a board across my lap. And my god, it was glorious. I wish I had a photo of me looking like the absolute pinnacle of geek that I was, but I was happy. I was actually really proficient with mouse and keyboard. And even though when you first plug that thing in, your ship responds to your inputs in ways that are far more intuitive than mouse and keyboard, there was still an adjustment period. On my right I now had pitch on forward and back, roll on right and left, and yaw on twist. And that was perfect. I hardly had to think about that at all. On the left, however, I had forward and back on forward and back thrust, and I assigned this rudder thing on the back to up and down strafe. A button here and here were left and right strafe. This took quite a long time to get used to, and it changed around a few times to see if there were better, more natural configurations. There weren't, but once I got used to it and the muscle memory picked up the slack to the point where things became instinctual, it opened up a whole new world for me. Just this simple 30 quid piece of really clunky plastic was the key to a massive ton of extra immersion that I never thought possible. I literally became that HOTAS, and eventually that initial frustration from not being able to perform as well as I had been on keyboard and mouse was swept aside. Now, remember me saying in the intro that you will have as much fun as me on any device. That still stands. On keyboard and mouse, I didn't love the game any less. I thought it was amazing, and I'm not going to say I was having more fun with a HOTAS, but I sort of was. I was advancing, but in a different direction. The immersion factor became a draw in itself. Just like the headset before it, the game didn't get any better, but there was now this overlying extra feature that I could only really conceptualize as residual self-image.
It is the mental projection of your digital self.
That's a joke, obviously, sort of. If you've ever modded a game on PC, you might get an incline as to what I mean. When you mod a game, you make it yours. It becomes personal. You in some form overlay your personal preferences to make it a better experience in your eyes. Well, setting up personal binds and inversions and dead zones and saturation curves for a HOTAS has that same effect. Nobody can just walk in and sit down and know how all the functions work on your ship. That would never happen. They might get the basic flight controls down after a few minutes, but they wouldn't have a clue how to set navigation, raise landing gear, turn on afterburners, drift for just that few seconds whilst using the couple mode, that sort of thing. Whereas to you, it's like second nature. And that's what a lot of people don't realise about the jump to stick. The controls are great and definitely immerse you deeper, but it's those little personal touches that you hone through constant use and trial and error that really embeds the experience as more or better than what you were experiencing before. Again, I'm not trying to bash mouse and keyboard because obviously you can customise that however you wish as well. But like, if you've got a 4-way hat near your thumb and you say, right, this is going to be my power triangle controls. Shields, engines, weapons and reset, and I can access it all without taking my hand away from the primary movement controls or holding a shift key or something that will lock me out of them. Then it's easy to see an actual tangible benefit in terms of just raw usability, never mind anything else. Anyway, I was really happy after a while. Now I was head tracking and flying around like I was freaking Fox McCloud. But should you get a throttle and stick? Well, that's a tricky question, but I'll just come out and say it. If you play only Star Citizen, then no, you'd be better with a stick and stick. But if you're 100% not interested in combat and racing, or anything in the game other than the main industrial game loops, then maybe you should consider it. If the jobs you do mainly involve going in straight lines for long periods, if you're a hauler for example, then it's possibly worth considering. But even then, you're still faced with the same issue I had back on the 30 quid throttle. At some point you're going to be assigning whole axi for strafe movements to either buttons or analog thumbsticks, which isn't ideal. If, however, you also play Microsoft Flight Simulator or DCS or anything that isn't 6 degrees of freedom, then the HOTAS is hard to beat. It's a tough one really, and it will depend on which game you play the most and what to tailor for. It can be done for Star Citizen, but with some pretty major concessions. And it's the same with stick and stick not being ideal for either DCS or Flight Simulator. It can be done, but a HOTAS usually comes with extra buttons and stays where you left it. Whereas to make a flight stick into a dead stick, you'd have to jump through some extra hoops, and could automatically find yourself on the higher end of the price range to boot. Unfortunately, that's a non-straight answer from me, who's supposed to be guiding you across the desert of the real. But if I had to black and white it, I'd say HOTAS for planes, HOSAS or stick and stick for spaceships. Okay, so now we've heard how I started off with a HOTAS on Elite. Eventually, after about 6 years or something, I upgraded to a better HOTAS, still on Elite. Even the mere thought of stick and stick hadn't occurred to me, or for all I know, anyone else at that point. Then Odyssey released and the exodus to Star Citizen began. And whilst I was managing great with the HOTAS like I had managed great in Elite, I started to see streamers and stuff appear with 2 sticks. And I thought, nah, that's not for me. As usual, totally obliviously happy. There's no way I can beat what I've already got. I'm absolutely immersed, remember? But as time went by, the more it starts creeping into my consciousness. You'd have more access to play with, it kept saying. Look at that guy low flying, it would say. You'd have ate shit multiple times by now if you tried that. You still eat shit even with 2 sticks. Ugh, it's an alien planet, Stephen. Those were sample collections. I was saying back to these inner thoughts, we're running out of desk space here. Plus it would have to match the other one, and they cost a bloody fortune. Not a gamble I'm willing to take. And then I seen this thing. The Z adapter. And that was it, straight away. I was like, nah, I'm gonna need these. So I bought a left stick, plus another base. I bought a couple of cams based on what I thought would be best, based on what I'd read online. That was the Cosmo cams with 0 detent. I watched the usual insurmountable amount of YouTube videos just to be sure I was doing the right thing. And actually, hey, wait a minute. I'm on YouTube now. You're me, and I'm supposed to tell you, like, things. That's funny. You're so screwed. You know who you should watch? Noobifier. That's who I watched, and I made all the right decisions. Watching me is like reading stuff on social media or something. You'll end up knowing less than when you started. Where were we? Stick and stick. Oh yeah, right. So anyway, let's just cut to the chase. There was an incremental bump in immersion. But we were getting used to it now, and it wasn't as dramatic, because it was now pretty normal having a control device for all those certain movements in my left hand. But there was also a new and almost unfathomable amount of precision. If I'd have jumped from a digital button on a keyboard to this left stick, it would have absolutely scalped me, I'd imagine. What I did was I set up forward and back as up and down strafe. So back was up and forward was down. Left and right was left and right strafe, and these 2 pinky triggers were forward and reverse. I did so much want this rotation here to be used in flight movements, and it was the whole reason I bought the Z adapter. But the problem was, when you're moving the flight stick forward and back, there's a natural tendency to want to twist this a little bit. So now it primarily gets used for things like adjusting spacing between salvage lasers or the convergence point of weapons, and I much prefer the feel of it on the Z adapter as well. The main advantage over the throttle controls, without a doubt though, is the length of the throw. So before we were using analog thumbsticks for up, down, left, right strafe, which were fine with copious amounts of speed limiting in constant use. Now though, the range of motion means you can be far more precise. You add a curve to this in the settings as well, and it's just delicious for the smaller, more accurate movements. And yes, the twin stick setup suddenly again made me realise that I'd been missing out on ranges of motion that back on mouse and keyboard would have tied my fingers in knots. Think about it like this. I can pitch up, whilst rolling right and yawing right with just my right hand. Whilst on my left, I can at the same time be strafing down and left whilst applying reverse thrust. All analog, and be able to adjust power, target things, deploy chaff, change weapons groups, whatever, all without removing control at any time. And although for the more sedate gameplay like cargo hauling, a throttle can be a good choice, and will leave the door open for other sim experiences, for Star Citizen and Elite, I've found the twin sticks to now be far, far superior. So, right, what did I miss, Stephen? Those pinky triggers sound rubbish for forward and back, Red. Not enough throw on them. Ah, right, yeah, so something had to give. A lot of people will probably bind forward and back on the forward and back axis on the left. And that was awesome, and that is what I did to begin with too. But I had been flying a lot of helicopters, so my brain was already adjusted for forward and back equaling up and down when I was using the throttle. Plus, the way combat works in Star Citizen, when you're trying to get your nose on target, having more control over those bottom thrusters was a really big consideration. but in the end the only solution was to go that one step further and get a set of pedals. However, this time I was using a whole new bit of my body I hadn't used before, so the immersion level got a massive boost. I immediately set them to forward and reverse motion, with the right toe brake controlling boost and the left toe brake controlling space brake, and I was instantly just in the game. I knew straight away I didn't have to fiddle around trying if maybe they would be better on yaw like a real plane or any of that noise. In Star Citizen, forward and reverse was absolutely outstanding, like just outrageously good. Haven't looked back since. And for some reason, again, just like with the right stick, it was a very natural feeling. I'm not sure why, but right foot to go and left foot to brake must just be pre-programmed into the human brain, because I didn't feel like there was any learning curve there at all. And now I had every movement access on a decently large throw, and the reliance on speed limiters fell away even more. I mean, I still use it, don't get me wrong, but mostly for small nimble ships that accelerate really fast. Arrows and Gladius size things tend to need a decent amount of limiting, or even for some bigger ships when you're working around asteroids and things like that. For other games like DCS, you now have your yaw controls as well, and toe brakes for manoeuvring runways and stuff. Playing too many different flying games using different controls will really mess with your muscle memory, and because I'm unwilling to give up pedals for forward and back on Star Citizen, that trend will likely continue. But yeah, I know it's an expensive hobby, but each little upgrade on this path was definitely worth it, and definitely brought something new. Space sims, twin stick, flight sims, stick and throttle. Multi-sim, you don't really have a choice but to get a throttle, unless you fancy going off the beaten path into dead stick territory, which might not be so bad. With the Virtual sticks I have, if you get the Mongoose CM3 base, I think it's just a case of turning an Allen key to switch between stick that doesn't spring back to centre and one that does. So that could be an option, and there's possibly other options out there as well. Definitely something to look into. Okay, so that's all the primary inputs out of the way. Let's now get rid of the reliance on keyboard altogether, for flying at least. A couple of reasons you might want to do this. First up is that the keyboard always looks the same. There's no way to display on it what each button does. And there will be a lot of controls that you only use once in a blue moon. For example, if you only really mine, you might forget the buttons that controls how your pip looks or something like that in combat. If you mainly play combat, you might forget how to switch your mining modules. Having something you can label or make super obvious what it does alleviates this issue. The other reason is again immersion. It's not a big thing really, but pressing dedicated switches and toggles for things definitely can't be sniffed at, especially if you have set these up specifically tailored or even created from scratch for your interests. Again, you get that personalised modded kick. I don't have a button box or control panel thing because I've never been able to justify the cost, but I'd be lying if I didn't say I have a very strange attraction to a good button. Especially those toggle switches with the flip covers. Oh my god. If you have the money to lay down for that, then I'm absolutely certain there would be a nice satisfaction to having big, tactile, clunky switches in your cockpit. In the meantime, however, I've opted for this thing called Matric. Basically runs a server between your PC and the pad, and lets you input keyboard commands and macros and stuff into your games. You can make your own panels or download from hundreds that are available in the community. I made this one from scratch and designed most of these buttons myself. It was only about £5 for that app, and it does the job very well. Here's another I made for Elite Dangerous. And these are all like fancy skeuomorphic buttons that, you know, depress and stuff. Everything does something when you press it. And you can add sounds to these as well. The alternative to this would be Game Glass, which a few of you might have heard of. Same idea, but I'm sure it was subscription based at the time, so yeah, I wasn't hearing any of that jazz. Plus I'm not sure how customizable it was either. It might be now though, but that's another one you could look at. And there might be more available out there as well. But this one allows me to visualise the more or less used things I need without using the keyboard. We've got start up and shut down here, eject cargo and eject here. These are all camera controls. This is a trackpad that lets me turn the camera. And these take me to a bunch of third-party websites and stuff like Airco and so on. These disable head tracking and voice controls and put up a med beacon. The best thing is you can download a community deck like this and just steal the buttons out of it to use in your own version. Each deck can have multiple pages, and there's a Discord for support and ideas. I'll leave a link below. The last thing I want to cover is voice control. For this we use Voice Attack, and if you want, and I highly recommend it, you can install some of these HCS voice packs. And there's some really crazy ones in there, from very famous dudes like Spock, Captain Kirk. I'm sure Brian Blessed is in there as well. Over time I've ended up with a whole crew that I can rotate to different stations aboard my ship to pretend that I have friends. Again, another nice little drop of immersion. The customization of choosing who deals with what systems, and the ease of use of commanding things to get things done when you're too busy watching the latest Red Resort video to deploy your own freaking landing gear. Is it necessary? Hell no. About as necessary as the Reliant Mako, but it feels good, and that's what this video is about. Crew command roster. Crewman Eden.
At your disposal.
Number 1.
As you wish.
Crewman Leo.
Yes, dude?
Engineering.
Yes, Commander.
Crewman Dark.
Yes, Commander.
Tactical.
Aye, aye, Commander.
Crewman Cleo.
Yes, Commander?
Science Officer.
I could get used to this chair.
That is all.
Thank you, Commander. Crew have been assigned to stations.
Switch to quantum mode.
Engaged.
Switch to flight.
Selecting.
Switch to guns.
Weapons displaying.
Switch to missiles.
Weapons displaying.
Scanning mode.
That's done.
Deploy landing gear.
Deploying landing modules.
Turn on lights.
On.
Light launch.
Ascending to 30 meters. Retracting modules. Handing you the con.
Launch complete.
Landing gear up.
Give me a random galactic fact.
A circumstellar disk. It's a torus, or ring-shaped accumulation of gas, dust, or other debris in orbit around a star in different phases of its life cycle.
Give me a random quantum theory fact.
Radioactivity. The atoms of a radioactive substance break apart, emitting particles. It is impossible to predict when the next particle will be emitted as it happens.
I'm sure Voice Attack and the HCS voice pack will come with a cost. Nothing super expensive though. Apart from that, get yourself a good screen, a good surround sound headset, and a good chair, and you should be golden. As always, if you need any advice, just ask below, and me or another viewer will be more than glad to help you out. I'll probably do another binds video soon as well, because a lot has changed recently, so keep an eye out for that. A big thank you to Tobii for sponsoring this video. I couldn't be happier to have the very first sponsor on this channel be a brand that pretty much goes hand in hand with the content. That's always got to be a bonus, right? I mean, think yourself lucky guys, we could have been talking about how immersive flying a spaceship with manscaped balls could be. And with that dying utterance of the script, I bid you all a fond farewell. Sorry about my voice dying halfway through recording this. I'll leave you with this to ruminate on until the next time. 07 guys.